Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz Interview Series with Jazz Saxophonist Rudresh Mahanthappa. Fresh off the cover of the latest November 2017 issue of Downbeat, he's got a new album out and he's busier than ever. He's releasing the follow-up album of his ensemble, Indo-Pak. The name of this new album is Agrima, and it's a heavy sound, but adheres to the band's basic premise of Indian rhythmic and melodic elements and a very charged improv framework born of that great New York City jazz scene. So along with discussing the new album, he talked about much, much more. So please dig this interview, my friends.
Thank you for taking a minute out for me today to talk about the new album. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Great to talk to you.
Great talking to you, man. So let's go ahead and start off here. You know, you're on the cover of Downbeat this month, and consistently I've seen that you're on the top of all of these lists, and I know that's not the raison d'etre of the jazz musician, but there's no way to escape the fact that you've really come into this modern jazz realm and made a very defined impact. So I just want to know from you, how's everything going lately?
That's funny. How is everything going lately? You know, it's really, it's one day at a time, I think. I mean, it's great to have all these accolades and awards. And, I think in this day and age, the way music is transmitted, the way music is sold, well, let me put it another way. I think that a few years ago, like maybe if you were in the 80s or 90s, I think these things actually made a really big difference in how much you were playing, maybe even how much you were making. And I think at this point, it's more cumulative. You build this kind of track record. I don't think it isn't so often that these there's like overnight kind of jazz stars or something. I think there was a time that if you won the critics poll, you could actually link that directly to gigs and tours, and it just doesn't like that anymore. And I had no problem with that. I mean, it's not like I grew up with it being one way and then it changed to something else. I kind of saw the paradigm shift around me as I was kind of, entering this music. But, it really is like one day at a time. I mean, it's amazing to be able to cover a Downbeat. It's amazing to, top these polls and, all these great things that are happening. I'm also the director of jazz at Princeton University now. I'm just starting my second year, so that's kind of like, I feel like another chapter in my work in the jazz world. Really interesting and fascinating, and has just kind of puts me in a different sphere of folks, that are not necessarily the people I play with or the jazz industry folks. I get to collaborate, do a lot of interdisciplinary collaboration, and just be at a place where I'm surrounded by smart people that aren't necessarily jazzy. So that's really, really fun for me. So I'm just trying to take it all in. And, I have two small kids, too. I have a 4.5-year-old boy and a 15-month-old daughter who you can probably hear in the background. So, and, self-releasing this album is a really intriguing and fun experiment. It wasn't, when people self-release, it's often viewed as, well, you had to self-release, but you didn't have another option. And, when I tell people that I'm self-releasing the album, they're like, it's usually like a barrage of advice. Well, did you talk to such and such a label? I'm like, no, it's really not like that. I'm trying to do something else here. I'm trying to be more connected directly to the fan and just have more control of my product and what I'm doing and the whole business aspect of that. So it's funny. I feel like every year I kind of there's something different about the way I'm conducting the world around me.
So let me ask you that. I guess that's the other thing that's very ever-present about what's going on right now. Talk to me about the Indo-Pak Coalition, the new album, Apti. Talk to me about how all of this came about. Just kind of give me an overview.
Well, Apti was our first album. That came out in 2008, and the group has existed in this present form since 2005. I had a version of this band in Chicago when I was first kind of, making some forays into incorporating my ancestry into what I do in ways that felt authentic and genuine. And when I lived in Chicago, when I first experimented with this instrumentation and this concept, it did not go so well, and I kind of expanded that ensemble pretty quickly. But, when I got to New York and I heard Dan Weiss and Reza Bassi and heard what they were doing, it felt like it was a really good time to try, to see if we could reform this group in a, I don't know, I guess in a more authentic way. And and with a lot more knowledge. I think I had learned a lot more about Indian music and just had kind of matured into a better sense of understanding what it meant to be Indian American for me, and So I reformed the band in 2005 and wrote some new music, and then we recorded a which came out in 2008, and at that time I think I was more of a purist. That album is with Dan Weiss playing tabla exclusively, and of course Reza's playing guitar, but a lot of acoustic guitar as well. And I wanted to kind of stimulate the sound of like a traditional North Indian music ensemble. I guess, here we are almost 10 years later, and I just don't feel like I have to prove any of those things anymore. I don't know who I was trying to prove them to. I guess prove them to myself that I could do this kind of, adhere to this very pure kind of sound. And, in the meantime, the band had actually played a lot of gigs, in the last 9 or 10 years, and we had developed a high level of interaction and a real band sound. And I just, with the new album with Agrima, I felt like, there's a lot of compositional thought that has gone into that body of work, obviously, but it was really important to me to find ways to highlight, vehicles to highlight the way the band interacts, because that's, I think, the real meat of what we do, and that has come out of playing together for more than 10 years now. So it's exciting for me, and it's also exciting to just show some of the real blatant ways the band has changed. Dan is using kind of a hybrid setup with tabla and parts of the drum set, and it's a very unique sound, and it's very, intriguing to watch visually, and Rez and I have both gotten into a lot of electronics and audio processing, and kind of bringing that sound to the band has, just given us a whole world of sonic possibilities that we didn't have before. And I think a lot of things on the album sound, like a rock band. Like I really wanted to approach this with a very rock-like aesthetic more than a traditional classical Indian aesthetic.
Well, that's the one thing that's interesting about a jazz trajectory in yours is that when you get involved in more projects, how does that help you grow as a musician, broaden out? Do you get that latitude to kind of go for a rock sound versus your solo work? How does all of that kind of come and commingle as a jazz organism for you?
Well, I think in all scenarios, I always feel like I sound like me. I'm trying to bring my personality to any situation. And even when I'm playing, say, when I'm playing with bird calls, that doesn't mean I'm not thinking about other things, whether it's for possible projects or just things that I'm just purely interested in, whether it actually manifests in anything else. But I think, we just developed lots of experience playing with different people, whether I'm playing with Mark Dresser and Jerry Hemingway, or whether I'm playing with, South Indian musicians, or, what have you. All these things they're all one continuum to me, and it's just a question of, which part of the river I'm dipping my toe into, and how that manifests.
What is the health and vitality of jazz these days? How do you feel in 2017 with, being on the forefront of new material and on the jazz scene? How is it doing?
I don't know. It's tough to say. I think it's really different for everybody. I think maybe more so than ever. I don't think, I was talking about this at the Jazz Connect conference last year, and it's something I discussed with students as well, was I think there was a time where you could actually model your career after a contemporary or someone that came before. And now I feel like everyone's scenario is so different, as far as, let's look at the larger picture. So there are more musicians than there ever have been, mainly because of the jazz education industry and the fact that, when I was going to college, there were 10 schools that had a jazz program, 10 universities or colleges that had a jazz program. And now there are literally hundreds, not thousands. And so you have this very high level of musicians coming out of college. And I don't think that necessarily means you have more people and more unique personalities and more people that are necessarily going to change the music, but you have all these people that play very well that you kind of have to wait to find your people and to find that band and to develop that sound and concept, assuming that you have those close trajectories. But then at the same time, you have less venues, you have less festivals, you have essentially no recording industry. Then the question is, what are all these people going to do? And I think that's where it gets really difficult. I mean, at least when I was coming up, there were still a few record labels, and getting signed actually meant something. And now I think it's what has become kind of a guerrilla business model of social media and self-promotion and putting your stuff on SoundCloud has actually become the norm. I mean, I think that's the way people get their music out there. And people don't really make that much money off of record sales, if any. It's really, you put out an album so you can go play gigs. And I think that's very different. I mean, I think there was a time where you could actually make an album and maybe even not tour, just because the album, you could actually make something off of album sales and continue to forward your career that way. So a lot of things have changed, and I think the dust has not settled yet. I think you just kind of have to be open to any idea. What I do fear, though, is I feel like there are a lot of younger musicians. There's an urgency that's keeping them from really developing a sound and practicing and really honing their craft and their artistry, because because promoting yourself is something you feel like you have to do right out of the gate, even if you have their stuff. I feel like there are lots of younger musicians that are spending more time on social media, promoting what they do instead of actually working on what they do. So, there are definitely some problems out there, but at the same time, I think there will always be interesting new voices, coming into this music and making a difference. And I feel like, that cream always does rise to the top. It's a little funny. And I think, and then you see people going into academia who maybe, 20 years ago would not have. And I think, obviously with my situation at Princeton, I see that as a way to kind of pass certain knowledge along. And I have this wonderful opportunity to actually steer a program and kind of change the way that this music is perceived, for audiences, but at the same time, yes, it is something that bolsters my livelihood. It makes it, possible or it helps towards, having a house and giving two small kids everything that they need and, all that. I don't know, man. It's tough out there. I mean, a lot of young musicians that kind of look for both, artistic guidance and career guidance, and I'm a bit at a loss as far as career guidance. I mean, I just hope that everyone will kind of keep their nose to the grindstone and continue to work hard. I feel like if you do, you will get recognized somehow eventually.
Absolutely. So how much joy do you get out of presenting this latest material, Agrima, live? Is it fun?
Well, we actually haven't done that much yet. I mean, it's really fun. I mean, but we've only done a handful of shows. We haven't really done that much yet. Most of the touring is probably going to start in the spring. Our official CD release, we didn't make a CD, did we? Our recording release is going to be at the Brooklyn Jazz Festival on October 21st. But yeah, just because of schedules, this is the longest period between albums I've ever had. It's going to be more than 2.5 years between the release of Agrima and the release of Bird Calls. And so I'm kind of, between labels and between albums, and also my first year at Princeton was very busy. It just kind of made sense to kind of take our time with this. And again, self-releasing allows me that, affords me that flexibility because, I'm not under the pressure of a record label who's saying, like, well, the album's coming out. How come you don't have a tour put together? I can kind of do this at my own pace and do it the way I want. So, but I'm very excited for us to get out there, and I'm hoping that, obviously, it'll be great to play lots of jazz venues, but I think, we'll have a lot of opportunities to play world venues and even some rock festivals, and it has a malleability, and I think it's very much music for the masses, if the masses will have us.
Absolutely. Well, Rudresh, I think that wraps everything up as far as what I wanted to know about this album and catching up with you these days. Congratulations on everything that's taken place. Good luck with the album and everything and the tour. I appreciate your time, and it's always a pleasure to talk with you. Yeah,
definitely. It was good to talk to you, too. And, and please let your listeners know the album will only be available on my website. And, you won't be able to find it on Spotify or iTunes or Apple Music or any of the streaming services. But the flip side of that is the download only costs $2.50. So, you know,
Beautiful.
I'm hoping that people will buy an album for less than they spend on coffee.
I think that makes total sense.
Great to talk to you. I hope we can connect again soon.
Sounds good, man. Thanks for listening and tuning in to yet another Neon Jazz interview, where we give you a bit of insight into the finest players in New York, Kansas City, and spots all over the world, giving fans all that jazz. And again, thanks to Rudresh for his time, his music, and his cool. If you want to hear more interviews, go to Famous Interviews with Joe Domino on the iTunes Store. Visit neonjazz at youtube.com, and for everything Neon Jazz, go to the neonjazz.blogspot.com. Until next time, enjoy the jazz, my friends.
Neon Jazz.